Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Titusville City Council meeting of December 11, 2018 at 6:30 p.m. I'll call this meeting to order. We do have a quorum, and we have Dr. Lila Jane Tibbetts of British Ministries to say our invocation for us, I believe. Yes, ma'am. There you are. Would you like to come up here, ma'am?
Well, greetings to you all. It's a pretty good-looking council, I'd say.
Well, thank you.
We never get that.
You've done a lot of work already.
You have just become our favorite minister.
And you're spending our money very wisely.
We try.
We're trying to build a wall? No, let's not go there. Oh, Father, we just come right now in Jesus' name. We thank you so much for these elected officials, Lord, that rule with integrity and do the best they can for Titusville. We thank you for all that you have done for Titusville through these people, Lord God. Give them wisdom as they rule and make decisions that will build Titusville up. We thank you for your love. We ask, Lord God, that you would truly give them wisdom with their spending and all the things that are needful. And we thank you for it in Jesus' name. Amen.
Thank you, ma'am. If you will join me in the pledge to the flag, everybody stand. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Clerk, will you please read the procedures for public comments?
Yes, sir. Individuals wishing to speak on public and non-public hearing agenda items must complete a sign-up card and present it to the clerk prior to the item being introduced. Those wishing to speak on quasi-judicial public hearings must complete a sign-up card and sign the oath. Individuals wishing to speak on non-agenda items may do so under petitions from the public present. This opportunity is offered twice in the meeting, and individuals may speak at either the first or second petitions, but not both. No sign-up card is required. Sign-up and oath cards are located on the table in the council chamber. Citizens shall not comment on any issue more than once during the meeting. All comments except petitions and requests must address the pending issues, and citizens will be given 3 minutes to speak on all items.
Thank you. Next item is approval of minutes.
Move to approve the minutes of the regular city council meeting on November 27, 2018, and the corrected minutes of November 27, 2018, and the special city council meetings on November 27th at 10:30 and November 27th at 11 a.m. and November 29th.
Second.
I have a motion. I have a second. Any further discussion or corrections? I see none. All those in favor say yes.
Yes.
Any opposed, like sign, passes unanimously. Special recognitions and presentations.
Yes, sir. Mr. Ball and Sean Stauffer. Mr. Ball is your TIFA representative. We'll provide a presentation to council on the 2020 budget, or 2019 budget, and the 2020 pro forma.
All right, gentlemen.
Good evening.
Good evening.
My name is Sean Stauffer. I'm the Water Resources Director for the City of Titusville. And I'm going to do just a brief presentation about the Area 4 Wellfield and also about TIFA. The item for approval tonight is the 2019 budget, and that approval will come during consent. And this is just a presentation, and also this will be the opportunity to ask any questions that you have. Okay. So just to start off, the City of Titusville and Miami Corporation are the two primary shareholders in TIFA, which is a limited liability corporation, and it operates a raw water well field, and it is also a public-private partnership. So I want to talk a little bit about the history. Prior to Area 4, the city's water was provided from the Area 2 well field and Area 3 well field. Both of these are the surficial aquifer, and those had served the city for quite some time. And so, but some of the conditions or some of the constraints of a surficial aquifer is they're unconfined, they're close to land surface, they are typically less than 50 feet thick, which means there's limited water. They're also, since they're close to the surface, they're susceptible to contamination as well as saltwater intrusion. And so, so the reason why we started looking for another well field was that back in 1999, we had population projections going up, as well as we were having issues with the water quality from those existing superficial well fields. And so the city embarked in 1999 on a study for a new water source, and the goal was to find a safe, reliable, and economically feasible water supply for the future. The results of that study, there were 5 alternative solutions that were identified. I won't go through all 5, but some of the well-known ones. The most expensive turned out to be to increase our purchases from COCO, and the most feasible option was to develop the Area 4 well field. Just to help locate you, we have a map here. You can see highlighted in the light green, those are the city limits of Titusville. And then you can see up in the northwest corner of Brevard, we have that yellowish polygon, and that's where the Area 4 well field is located. That's approximately 12 miles from the city as the crow flies. The first few wells started in 2012, and the well field reached full production in 2015. So in 2010, the city and Miami Corporation established Tifa LLC, and that was a partnership that was developed to settle a dispute between the city and Miami Corporation. That creation of the LLC functions as a raw water utility. We hold public meetings. We also include an administrative board, and we prepare annual budgets. And Jim Ball is the city representative on the Tifa board, and I'll hand the presentation over to him for a few comments.
It's a real honor and privilege to be able to, you all know I'm Jim Ball. So it's an honor and privilege to be able to serve as your management representative on Tifa. It's a hugely unique kind of very innovative partnership between a municipality and a private corporation that produce the city's well fields up there. And my role is basically just to help oversee how things are going smoothly on your behalf, to check all the expenses that are coming through, and understand the technical things that are going on with the well field. If necessary, I can tell you it's operating very smoothly, and Sean and his team do a fantastic job. So, just like council or CRA or any other body, I rely very heavily on staff's expertise. And I also just want to comment that our partners with Miami Corporation and Farmton are just top-notch. And we all have the same objective. It goes extremely well. I'll be, after Sean's finished, if you have any questions about my role or how it goes, I'll be happy to answer it.
Thank you, Jim. On the next slide, this is just a summary of the budget itself. Within the consent agenda item, we have more of the details of the budget, but I figured I would pull out what is the most important thing to the city of Titusville within the Tifa budget, and that is the water rate that the city pays to Tifa. As a reminder, the raw water that we purchase from Tifa makes up about 2/3 of the raw water supply of the city. The actual cost for the water in 2017 was $1.14 per thousand. The current year budget for 18 is $1.14, and you can see that we're projecting for calendar year 19 for the water rate to stay the same. And then the pro forma, which is just a projection for 2020, we're projecting a 1 cent increase in the water rates, and that's due to power costs, insurance, and labor escalations. And just moving on, as a reminder, the requested action for approval will be part of the consent agenda, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have now about Tifa or the Tifa budget.
Let me change my little card here. Member Jordan. I know your name, I had to find your number.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Mayor. What's the difference in the water quality from our Area 4 well and Coco's water? Is there a difference in the water quality?
Well, the water that we purchased from Cocoa is treated water.
Okay.
And the water from Area 4
It's
is raw water.
It's raw water, okay.
Yeah, so a penny, a gallon per gallon comparison would have to be modified because, obviously there's treatment costs involved.
Okay, so what we paid for from the city of Cocoa is double the cost? We're paying $1.14 for our well, so what are we paying for Cocoa?
I haven't done those calculations in a while, but 3 to 4 years ago, when I was looking at it, the cost was about 4 times as much from the city of Cocoa.
Really?
And the main reason for that is because the city of Cocoa treats us as a typical customer, and what that means is we don't get a bulk rate, and that means that the more water you buy, the more it costs.
Right. Yeah. And the other question, if we're paying $1.14 to the LLC, what are we charging the citizens for the water per thousand?
I believe the current rates are around $2.53 per thousand.
Okay.
Okay, but that is once again, that's a treated rate cost.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, thank you.
Member Nelson?
I have a question. I thought Miami Corporation was talking about developing that area around the well field. Am I wrong? Right? Wrong?
You are correct.
And will that have an impact on our water, or our ability to get water out of there?
No, we don't expect so. The land where the wells are located and the pipelines, Tifa owns that.
Okay.
As well as Miami Corps has a financial responsibility to make sure that the well field is a success because they also enjoy a return on the well field.
Okay.
So they make a profit off of this.
Okay. I was just sort of concerned that.
So it might be worth noting that I think their plans do envision that there's going to be additional wells that they develop up in Volusia County area to take care of that development, and that, it's all part of the whole process of a consumptive use permit that's issued by the St. Johns River Water Management District to look at how one entity's withdrawal of water affects another entities and to try to ensure that that doesn't happen. So that's something I know we get briefed on and by Miami Corp, and we're going to keep an eye on.
And I'd also like to add that Miami Corps, in my experience, is that they are excellent stewards of the environment, and that they are very protective of their lands, of their property. Their property is also used for wetland mitigation credits.
Okay.
So, they take great pride in protecting the environment. And so there's no concern on my side.
In terms of area, how big is Area 4, the well field?
We don't own, when I showed the polygon on the map, we don't own all that land. We own 20 to 30 feet on either side of the pipeline and then the well-filled areas. So the total acreage is rather small.
Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Member Jordan?
Thank you, sir. We're doing 0.75 million gallons per day, is that correct?
It's 2.75.
So we're doing 2.75. Do we have a vision for the future where we'll be totally off of the city of Cocoa?
Let me go back. The 2.75 million gallons per day, that's from Tifa. Well, that's the raw water we receive from the Area 4 well field.
Okay.
Currently, we are purchasing 100,000 gallons per day from the city of Cocoa.
Okay.
And that is at a take or pay. And so we consider that a baseline or a minimal amount. We had an agreement with them to purchase 500,000 gallons a day, take or pay. And then I believe it was 2 to 3 years ago, I renegotiated that agreement to step it down to the 100,000 gallons a day. And then that's where we will stay for the foreseeable future.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry. Member Stokel.
Was this, I know it's relatively small, but this rate increase, were you guys anticipating that, or is that something that we may potentially have to be looking at raising water rates because of that increase happening?
The current rate that we're paying now is the $1.14, and the rate for 2019 is still $1.14.
Okay.
The increase that we showed for the 1 cent, that was out in 2020. And so, and that's a projection. So we will know better as the year progresses whether or not we'll need to raise, or whether or not that'll have any effect on the utility.
So not necessarily looking at it this budget cycle that we're about to start planning for, or it would be the following
It
year?
would be the following one.
Okay.
And I would say that that 1 penny represents about, I think it's about $15,000 in cost
Okay.
to the city of Titusville's water resources utility, and our annual budget is about $20 million.
Okay.
So it's a very small percentage of our expenses.
Okay. Thank you.
I have a question. It seems some years ago, it was stated that we keep that Cocoa line open as a backup or emergency situation. Is that still the case?
Yes, sir. That's the, when I described the 100,000 gallons per day take or pay, that is the minimal amount that we need to move through it to keep it fresh, first and foremost, as well as it keeps that connection alive in case we have a serious problem with the system. We're able to bring Cocoa on, whether that be a main break or a fire or something happens to our treatment plant. As a reminder, the city of Titusville spent quite a lot of money working with the city of Cocoa in the original agreements back in '95 and paid significant tap-on fees to have access to that water. And and from a water operator's perspective, to have these multiple backups is a very comforting thing and helps us maintain water service to our customers.
Yeah, I think it's a very prudent thing to do, and I just want to bring that point out that that's why it's still there.
Yes, sir.
So, thank you. I see another question from Mr. Jordan. Here you are.
I'm trying to understand, because we get 100,000 gallons and there are certain... Thank you. I'll get a hang of this in a minute, yeah. Since we get 100,000 gallons of water from the city of Cocoa a day, there are certain members of the city that gets Cocoa's water versus get our water. Is that correct?
We currently have one customer that is purely Cocoa water.
How is that possible?
It has to do with the piping configuration.
So does he pay less or more?
They pay the city of Titusville rate. They are a city of Titusville customer. But due to the piping configurations and the valving, they are the only customer that has 100% Cocoa supply.
Wow.
Typically the south side, 50 and below, it's a blend of Titusville water and Cocoa water.
Okay, so you bring the raw water in, you purify it, and then somewhere the Cocoa water and our water is commingled and distributed out. Is that what you're
Yes, the
saying?
pipeline is down by Kings Highway,
Okay.
right along Grissom. That's where we have the interconnection between Cocoa's pipe and the city's pipe. And so that water moves north, and it's treated water.
Right.
So it comes in, and then we have a ground storage tank on Armstrong Drive off of Grissom. It's a 3 million gallon storage tank, and so we keep about 1 million gallons in there. And we bring in Cocoa water in there, as well as we bring in some Titusville water. And then that water is, it's not retreated, but we do, we polish it, add a little bit of ammonia, add a little bit of chlorine, and make sure that we send it out as best as we can. And so that's a blend that then gets pumped out to our customers, typically south of the 50 area, receive that blended water.
Okay. I think this is a good opportunity for you to explain why we pay what we do pay for our water versus what the people in Orlando pay for their water, because of the purity of the water in one place versus what we have to do to our water here? Because there's always a question is why is our water so much more expensive or?
Sure, and each year during the budget process, we put together a bar chart, and that shows our water costs. We usually show it as the current rate and then the projected rate, and then we compare ourselves to various utilities in the general area. And always, OUC is the lowest. And the big difference between the source for OUC and the source for Titusville is the volume of the water. And their water is also somewhat cleaner. The raw water, it takes less treatment, but they have access to much greater volumes of water. Whereas when one of our wells can pump maybe 200 gallons a minute, one of their wells will pump 2,000 gallons a minute. And so it's much easier for them to collect that water and then distribute it. It takes less wells as compared to the city of Titusville. So their overall cost for production is much less than ours. As well as we're on the coast, so things are saltier here. It's just how it is.
Thank you, sir.
Vice Mayor.
Yeah, it's a little more interesting now that I'm hearing about the water coming from Cocoa up the pipe, up Grissom, somewhere around my house over there in Imperial Estates. And what I'm trying to understand is where does the Cocoa water and the Titusville water become hybrid? Where does it join?
That's at the Armstrong facility, and that is a 3 million gallon ground storage tank located on Armstrong Drive.
Okay, and so we oversee the quality of the water after it comes out of Cocoa. I guess what I'm trying to understand is that the quality, and I don't want to get paralysis with analysis here, but the quality of water is equal no matter where you're at in the city of Titusville.
Yes.
Because it's not concerning, but it's interesting to think about that we're getting the water coming from Cocoa, which we're not producing, Cocoa's producing. And so we're not exactly sure like we are what our water is. And then that water goes to our plant, and we make sure that it's equal quality to what we have everywhere else. Yes,
and Cocoa follows under the same treatment requirements by the state of Florida that the city of Titusville does.
Yeah, and I'm not being mean to Cocoa. I'm sure their water's fine. But I thought it was an interesting point that I had really not thought about that we could have various qualities of water since it's coming from various places, but you take care of that with the Armstrong plant, for example.
That's correct.
Thank you.
One other interesting point is that Cocoa's water comes from Orlando, or right on the other side over there?
Yes, they have a number. Their wells are located in Orange County.
And they produce water for the Air Force Base and several other cities in South Florida. It's about almost 50% of the water that's used comes from Cocoa.
Yeah, I understand. It even goes out to Cocoa Beach. I think so.
Yeah. Well, that was originally when the Air Force came in, they needed water, so they paid Cocoa to go over to Orlando, drill the stuff, and get it in and process it. And then they have been doing that ever since that time, and they make quite a bit of money on it, and then anybody that comes in from anywhere else pays 10% more.
Yeah, when I got my briefing from you, I remember thinking that, Cocoa is sort of like the oil Saudi Arabia. I mean, they really are. They got way out in front of the curve.
An oil well, but I thought it might be mixing too many metaphors there. Okay. We need, if there aren't any other questions, we need a motion to accept the presentation of the 2019 TIFA budget and the 2020 pro forma.
I believe Mr. Jordan just made that motion, so I'll second it.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor say yes.
Yes.
Any opposed, like sign. Passes unanimously. Next item, sir. 5B.
Yes, sir. Agenda item 5B, Canaan Associates will present the recommendations and strategies relating to the land use, transportation, and housing portions of the comprehensive plan. The planning staff will follow with the second presentation on the full draft of the 2040 comprehensive plan.
Hi. Tonight, we're going to present to you our draft comprehensive plan, and you've received several versions of, or parts of this over the past year. We have our consultant, Kane & Associates, which will give you the presentation on their recommendations, and then I'll follow with a short presentation, a synopsis of how we roll that into a new draft for you. We have that under your consent agenda, the entire draft plan for you to review. And we've also included a request for a motion to accept an advisability directing us to move forward with it if you agree with our approach. Just to give you a brief background, especially for a new member, Mr. Jordan, we started this about 1.5 years ago, and we've been working with Kane & Associates on this project since last summer, and we started with 3 workshops. Public workshops that were really well attended, and we got a vision document out of that, kind of summarizing all the input we received from the public. And that was adopted by the council on January of 2018. And with that, we went rolling with revising the comprehensive plan based on that vision. And then we also rolled in a few other projects that we had going parallel to this that included the coastal management policies, which or most of the other members have been well aware of, related to policies to address sea level rise. And then we also had another consultant that dealt with historic preservation. So we've rolled these 2 projects and others as well into this final document for you. Afterwards, we will, if you support this, especially with the consent agenda and our request for you to accept the advisability, we'll come back to you in 2019 with additional presentations on different parts of this, especially as how we will go forward with adopting it. So with that, I'll turn it over to Eliza Giuliano with Kane & Associates on their presentation.
Hi, good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. Thank you for having me. We've had the privilege of working with your staff as well as your citizens over the past year, as Brad described, on elements of this comprehensive plan. I'm Eliza Harris Giuliano with Kane & Associates. We're a design-based planning firm based in Orlando. Brad already went through a few of the milestones, but this started back in the fall of 2017 when we had the 3 workshops Brad mentioned with citizens, resulting in the Titusville Tomorrow Vision document, which we presented to you in January and you accepted. We then worked with staff to integrate that vision into the comprehensive plan, as well as staff forwarded the other elements that were described into a full comprehensive plan draft, which we now have available. And then now we're in that last milestone of City Council reviewing that draft and the principles in it, and then moving that forward to public review. So what I'm going to present to you this evening is not a detailed review of every element of the plan, but really talk about the principles that went into this new plan, which are that it be based on a vision, that it be organized around place, that it integrate mobility with place, that it present a clear vision, modernize concurrency, and highlight strategies. So I'll talk a little bit more about each one of those. So the vision, of course, is where we started, and this was kind of a fun exercise we did of putting together a newspaper in 2027. I showed you this last time I was here. And that vision for the future is that Titusville has developed a vibrant, growing economy, thriving on redevelopment in older neighborhoods and downtown, and on the major roadways leading into town. And that downtown is the shining face of the city, with exciting, beautiful new public squares, urban parks, and hosting community events, activities that cater to all of the citizens and visitors that might come to Titusville, making it a very interesting place to visit. So that was the vision that came out of the vision workshops. We worked collaboratively with citizens, both finding out what their concerns were, as well as what their hopes for the future were, and digging deep into specific areas, into the mapping, and seeing what solutions we could put together for different areas of the city. One of the big focuses of the vision was creating value, and that means creating value for citizens by whether it be enhancing their neighborhood so their property value is increased, or creating value by creating great places for them to spend their time, whether they be parks or commercial spaces. Also creating value for businesses, so the businesses will want to move to Titusville, which is important for both the city and its citizens, and for the city itself, creating a brand for the city that's valuable, as well as, of course, revenue, which is important to be able to provide great services for your citizens. As part of the vision, we came up with 3 keys, which were geographically based. They were the downtown, the waterfront, and the gateways, and I'll talk a little bit about more of those because they all made their way into the comprehensive plan. Now, putting together the vision from the visioning workshops with past work, there is a vision in the comprehensive plan itself, and that is what's in front of you now, which is that with a city unified by nature and space, the city wants to protect its future, and it's going to do that by focusing on pedestrians and pedestrian scale design, protecting the waterfront, focusing on smart growth policies, protecting nature, and embracing the huge opportunity of the trail and being a trail town. So that was the first principle that went into the comprehensive plan development. The second is being place-based, and which is explicit in the comp plan as one of the major elements of the comp plan is places, and that's new in this version of the comp plan. What does it mean to be place-based? The most obvious example is that it focuses on mixing uses, whereas the old plan and a lot of plans around the country have been based around uses. So is it commercial or is it residential? Instead, we're thinking of, is it a neighborhood? Is it a gathering place? Which usually involves more than one use, and that's the kind of places that people like to spend time, more like, in fact, Titusville's historic downtown, which was mixed use. And it's only as comprehensive planning got into certain trends that uses started to be separated. And so, in a way, we're going back to the original vision of the town. And that is reflected in the mapping. So the mapping moving forward will be based more on places and character rather than, again, separating out uses. And this creates important flexibility. As the economy changes, a property owner buys a piece of vacant land or a redevelopment opportunity, he doesn't always know, or she doesn't always know, where the market's going to be 5 years from now. Is it going to be in the office domain? Is it going to be in multifamily? And so having a little bit more flexibility in the comprehensive plan allows the city to be more successful from a business standpoint because the development is able to respond to the market without the level of delay required in updating the comprehensive plan. And also, of course, mixing uses, which has benefits in terms of mobility. And then the second way we think about being place-based is that it integrates multiple disciplines. So places aren't just made of development or transportation or parks. They're made of all of those things and how they fit together. So the plan thinks about those as a unified element, creating great places, rather than as separate, unrelated elements. So this places element of the comprehensive plan consists of these eight pieces, 3 of which you should look very familiar because they were the 3 keys to the vision, and I'll talk about those first. So in the discussion of downtown, the major focus is creating a memorable place where people want to be, whether that be residents, businesses, or visitors, and a place that is comfortable and safe to walk and bike. Because we find that that's both efficient from a sustainability standpoint to have mobility options, and because very often when people are visiting, they like to be spending time outside of their car instead of sitting in traffic. The second key to the vision, which is now in the comprehensive plan, is this idea of the waterfront. The waterfront is obviously a huge asset for the city of Titusville, so how is the city protecting and capitalizing on that? Protecting it from a nature standpoint, making sure that the natural resources continue to function in a positive way, and also providing reasons for people to be there, activities, water-based activities that people want to engage in. One of the major proposals related to the waterfront was this idea of a continuous waterfront trail. This is a huge potential opportunity for the community to create better access for citizens to the waterfront, to get out there and view it, to connect the park, the public spaces that are already on the waterfront. One of the discussions we had in the public workshops was creating more activities that would draw people to those public spaces. And so this waterfront trail is a long-term vision. We talk about it in 2 phases, a 1.5 mile first phase, and then eventually trying to get to 6 miles. Now that, again, is a long-term vision that will require negotiation with property owners, negotiation with FDOT, and so keeping this vision in the forefront, for instance, as redevelopment may occur along those waterfront properties, to be able to have conversations about how we can have a mutually beneficial result with those property owners that will result in the city having this great asset moving forward. The third key to the vision is the gateways. The gateways are these major roads throughout the city, which of course are important from a transportation standpoint, but they're also a huge resource in terms of potential redevelopment. We know that the city does not have a lot of vacant land, so much of the development that will occur will be in the form of either infill or redevelopment, and the gateways are an opportunity for this to occur because there's underutilized land along these roadways. And the advantage is that as that redevelopment occurs, it actually can have a huge positive impact on the image of the city. Because rather than sort of more vacant-looking spaces, you would have the opportunity to have design guidelines that would make those new developments really have a positive visual impact. And this is what people see when they drive into the city. They see your gateways and the development along them. Pardon. So, of course, those were the 3 keys to the vision, and we were looking at the city as a whole, but the vision didn't cover everything, and the comprehensive plan, of course, has to be comprehensive. So, in addition to those 3 keys, there's 5 additional elements in the comprehensive plan places category. Those are the city as a whole, neighborhoods, historic preservation, employment, and coastal management. Citywide, an important focus for any city is having a high quality of life for the citizens. Another key element was capitalizing on the momentum of the economy and the space economy in this area and making sure that the city is part of that growing business environment. Sustainability is important to the city and its citizens, both in terms of sustainability in the natural environment, as well as making sure that the things that we build, whether they be new development or transportation, encourage a more environmentally friendly outcome. And finally, smart growth, which we've already alluded to in a number of ways, but the kind of redevelopment that we're talking about is what we would call smart growth, as well as growing in a way that encourages people to have mobility options. And the final 4 places I'm not going to spend a lot of time on, but of course, neighborhoods are incredibly important, and they're the fabric that holds the community together. Employment is critical to the success of the city as well as the success of its citizens, and that can occur at many scales, whether it be a home-based business, a live-work, a neighborhood-based business, or our major employers. And then, as Brad mentioned, historic preservation was a major focus of this update and was dealt with, and I believe you've already heard a good bit about that, so I won't go on, as well as coastal management, again, had a separate focus. So those were the first 2 keys to the vision, the first 2 keys to the comprehensive plan update, which were vision and places. And I spent quite a bit of time on those. I'm going to very quickly go through the last 3. So integrating mobility in place. You've heard me mention mobility a number of times, but this, something very important that is now part of contemporary planning practice is that land use influences transportation, and transportation influences land use. They're really joined at the hip. So the way we design our places impacts whether people will choose to walk, bike, drive, or take public transit. And if you design places around driving, people will only drive if they have a choice. If you design places for multiple modes, then people will have different choices, and they'll make a variety of different choices in that context. So the new plan is organized around giving people those choices and designing communities in a way that does that. And in addition, as you mentioned, walking and biking are ecologically more friendly forms of transportation, because you're not using fuel, you're not using as much pavement. So encouraging those to the extent possible, it's not always the right choice, but to the extent that those can at least be possible within the city, it's a huge advantage. And of course, with the city now being a trail town, expanding upon that with the bicycle network is important. And mobility really becomes a lifestyle option that makes people want to move to Titusville or want to visit Titusville if they have more options about how they spend their time, rather than necessarily being required to spend their time in a car to travel. The next principle is having a clear vision for the future. On the left, you see the existing future land use map for the city of Titusville. The proposed direction is the map on the right. And as you hopefully can see, it's a much clearer way of communicating. The map, the future land use map, really is the strongest communication tool within the plan for what the city wants the future to look like. And we believe this, the proposed map is a much clearer way of communicating that. It consolidates the existing 19 districts down into 8 districts with one overlay. And that accomplishes two things. It accomplishes that clarity because it's really based more on character and place rather than, again, based on use. So when you're trying to separate uses, you have to have this variation of every property along, say, one corridor has a different future land use category. But once you go to mixed use, that no longer becomes necessary. And in fact, it's better to have that consistent character along the corridor rather than to constantly have people coming in asking for land use changes that don't really change the character of the place. So as a result, you get this clear map moving forward. Now, it's also important to note that, that there's still another layer of regulation under the future land use map. So zoning continues to regulate what people can do on their property. And that doesn't, so getting a new future land use doesn't automatically mean that people can just develop anything that's permitted within that future land use. They also have to have the right zoning category, and that zoning category has to be approved by a city council. So it's not liberalizing things more than you would like to see. In addition, the staff has proposed, and we think it's a great idea, this idea of a maximum residential density map so that, as you can see, the neighborhoods, that fabric throughout the city in yellow, is a large area. The residential density map puts a little more control on that, so the community feels comfortable that the densities are not going to be changing around them in ways they don't feel comfortable with. Second to last principle is modernizing concurrency. Concurrency is the part of the plan that ensures that as new development comes online, the services that the people in those developments need will be there for them. So two elements that have been updated are transportation and parks. In terms of transportation, again, you may be sensing a theme. It has to do with mobility and giving people mobility options. So rather than looking only at concurrency for driving, the concurrency now considers walking and biking. Particularly, the concurrency has an element related to bicycling, and then there are policies throughout the plan related to walking and biking. And then the second one, parks. So the shift now in the new plan relative to parks has more to do with really the way citizens use parks on a regular basis. Previously, it was based on acreage, so there was required to be a certain number of acres per citizen, but it didn't matter where in the city that acreage was. The new plan calls for parks to be within a certain distance of residents. So for instance, as new people move into downtown, it's important that they have a park within a reasonable walking distance. It's less important to them whether there's an extra acre of parkland on the other side of the city. So the new parks requirement requires parks to be within a reasonable walking distance of a majority of citizens. And that's also important if the city does get denser, that having quality park space close to people is important. The total acreage of parks, especially given that you have a confined city boundary, is less important. And lastly, highlighting strategies for redevelopment. So previously, and this is very typical of comprehensive plans, the policies were really a mix of kind of principle level policies that shouldn't change over time. Like, we always want our parks to be great. That's not an exact policy, but you get the idea. Whereas we need to update our parks plan is a strategy. That's something that won't be in every comp plan, but is something specific that needs to be accomplished before the next plan. So what we've done is we've separated out those principles, things we always think should be true moving forward in the plan, from the strategies that are really checkboxes to accomplish before the next plan. And that makes it easier for the city to go through those strategies and make sure they get accomplished before the next plan. It makes it easier to track outcomes. And just a couple of examples are the mobility plan, which I believe is already underway, a waterfront trails master plan, and some updates to land development regulations. Those are the kinds of things that, that could be done before the next plan. So those are the principles that went into the plan update. I'm just going to go very quickly through the plan outline. The introduction talks about the vision, a little bit about the vision workshops that we discussed earlier, and the background. People gives some context about the community and the trends within the city of Titusville. Places you've heard a lot about, but it focuses on those different places we talked about, particularly as it relates to future land use and mobility, but also addresses some of the other integration. Housing focuses, of course, on housing, but specifically on housing quality, affordability, and ensuring some variety of housing types within the city. Natural resources focuses on open space and the natural environment. Public facilities focuses on all the different types of public infrastructure that are important to support citizens' lives, including such as utilities and schools. Intergovernmental coordination addresses how the city interacts with other government agencies such as the Department of Transportation or the Water Management District. And finally, the appendix, that's where you find that's where you actually find a summary of all the strategies in the plan. So the strategies are actually in each section of the plan, but then they're summarized in an implementation matrix so that, again, staff and the city council can start to go through those and see how close you're getting to accomplishing the goals of the plan and the implementation. So thank you very much. That's all I have. I don't know if you have questions or if Brad wants to.
Thank you very much.
I'd like to finish with my presentation. It'll be real short, and then I thought we'd take questions right after that, unless you have questions now if you want. Okay. Should we wait? Okay.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes, sir. Go right
Thank you very much. You were talking about the parks, but we only have a few parks that we maintain. There are parks that the county maintains also. So how do we, if we come up with a design or we say this is what we want our parks to look like or we want to maintain them in a certain way, how do we coordinate that with the county to make sure they are part of the overall plan that we're looking at?
We were going to suggest that the revision to the level of service standards being recommended by Cannon Associates will enable us to come up with standards in our land development code related to new development. So it could be something that we could require of new development, such as, for example, a new subdivision or a multifamily development would have maybe a pocket park or some kind of linear park or some kind of recreational component to it. And that could suffice and meet that level of service standard. So that would be available, that would be in close proximity to a residential use. That's where we were thinking with that. So it would be maintained and owned maybe by the developer or association. Doesn't necessarily have to be dedicated and controlled to the county or to the city. But that's up to us if we did want to accept additional lands for parks.
Okay, when we did the workshop, I asked a question about golf carts. How is that, did you think about it at all or you just ignored me?
No, sir, we thought about it. Yeah, we haven't included it in this study. We didn't have time to include it based on the time frame from the last workshop we had to incorporate it into this plan. But this is a draft, so we can look into that and incorporate that into this document before final adoption, of course.
Can I
Yeah.
something to that? We've done a number of private developments where golf carts are pretty popular, and I know I listened to the workshop, and I know there's some issues in terms of crossing FDOT roadways that have to be dealt with. But in general, the kinds of streets that we would be advocating that would be lower speed would be pretty comfortable for golf carts to be on, as well as, you know, there's certain type of, I specialize in bicycling, and there's certain streets that you don't even need a bicycle lane because they're moving slowly enough. So a lot of the street network should actually be conducive to both driving regular cars, driving golf carts, biking. And then on the bigger facilities, you have to worry about how you separate those out.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
I see one light on here. Member Stokel?
Just wanted to clarify, and I think you just touched on it. This is just a draft to see, is this the direction we're wanting to go in? We'll come back with the comp plan, be able to kind of say, hey, could you add this or potentially move something? But is this the direction we want to go in?
Yes.
Okay, perfect.
Yes.
That's what I thought.
So I'm going to give you, I'm going to take that from you. I'm just going to, I'm not going to go through all of these slides. Some of this have already been addressed or brought up to you at the workshop and even by Eliza tonight. But I just want to give you staff's take on how we incorporated their recommendations into this plan, including the recommendations from the other consultants and other projects that were working parallel to this. We started out with this understanding that there was going to be a pretty dramatic growth projection based on the University of Florida's estimate of what our population would be in the 20-year horizon. And they have three projections, a high, middle, medium, and a low projection, and they've estimated about a medium. So we're looking at exceeding a 60,000 person threshold residential population in our city at the end of this planning horizon. And the issue we find with that is, as we brought up to you at your workshop, was that we have we're running out of places to put that population based on our current development pattern. And the comprehensive plan kind of encourages one certain type of development pattern. We're hoping that this new comprehensive plan will allow us to have some more flexibility, allowing us to allow properties that are underutilized to be redeveloped where infrastructure is already located. And that'll help protect some of these marginal lands that we've identified to you at your last workshop. And those lands are primarily wetlands and floodplain areas, and so they're very restricted. I do want to mention, Trevor mentioned this at your workshop, that the Florida Department of Transportation has developed what they've called context-sensitive classifications. And this is related to their complete streets policy. And what they are going to be doing is identifying every segment of their roadways, state roadways, not local or county or anybody else, as to which classification that particular segment will fall under. And they have certain criteria that they developed. And they indicated to us that if they will look at the local jurisdictional plan to help inform the decisions as to which classification that particular segment should be. And the reason why that is important is, say, for example, at the workshops, there was the example brought up about the Kmart building over on Cheney. You have an underutilized property, it's vacant, you have a parking lot in front of it, there's potential for redevelopment there. Right now, the land use doesn't allow it, the comprehensive plan doesn't even allow a residential component there at all. So it's very inflexible as far as being able to allow mixed-use development or redevelopment on that property right now. We believe this comprehensive plan will help do that, it helps support that kind of concept. And it will allow for a context classification that might be more urbanized. And so if we had this plan in place and FDOT looks at this, this may be some kind of classification they would apply to that particular segment or to any other particular segment we have of their roadways inside our city. And that will help inform them as which decisions of what kind of improvements they'll put onto those roadways, even when they do any improvements or resurfacing of those segments. That includes different types of bike lanes, sidewalks, anything that might be within their right-of-way that they would do. We believe that the recommendations coming out of Kane & Associates and the other consultants and that are being rolled into this comprehensive plan are consistent with the Space Coast Transportation Planning Organization's long-range vision for the long-range transportation plan that was developed a few years ago. We also believe that it's consistent with the Economic Development Strategic Plan that you adopted a couple of years ago. And we also believe it's consistent with the CRA Downtown Master Plan that was adopted, I believe, is in 2010. And there were also other plans and small area plans that were developed and adopted by the city in the past 10 years that we also believe that this plan is consistent with. Again, this is, as Eliza already showed you a snippet of our proposed land use strategy, this is the whole land use plan map. So again, as she's already mentioned, we're consolidating several land use categories into a few. And we're focusing or encouraging redevelopment in the gateway corridors, the downtown and the neighborhood centers. And the reason for that is it allows some more certainty of redevelopment of those properties without having to go through extensive number of public hearings. We at one point came up with, when we were doing our code update a few years ago, some of you may remember that, we identified how many rezonings the city has gone through or processed since 1993, and a good portion of them are properties that were flipped from residential to commercial, back to residential, and then back to commercial again. And in fact, you're going to receive another application on that example. It's actually gone back 3 or 4 times. It's going back from commercial to residential. That's what they're requesting. And it doesn't provide any kind of help to us or to the city to kind of make people go through that process. If we have what's basically a mixed-use land use category that allows the property owner to develop a property with commercial or residential, or hopefully both, provided they meet certain urban design standards, which is a strategy that's being recommended that we adopt. And so we did give you a few presentations before about what's called form-based code, and we don't necessarily have to adopt all those principles, but we can adopt certain urban design standards that would help accommodate a mixed-use type development along our corridors. So that's a strategy is being recommended. In order to implement the plan, that's something we would need to go forward with. As already mentioned, the 2 main elements that are being amended as far as level of service standards are related to transportation and to parks. And we support this. And basically, we're adopting a more robust complete streets policy into the comprehensive plan, in addition to revisions to our level of service standard related to transportation. Instead of relying on just our roads and whether there's enough roadway lanes to accommodate new traffic, which we don't have resources to add more lanes on, we're looking at other modes. And in fact, we're going forward with a mobility plan, right now a master plan with a consultant, to help us identify where we can fill in gaps for trails, bike lanes, and for sidewalks. So again, we're going forward with our mobility master plan, and that will be presented to you probably in April, a first draft of that. And as mentioned by Eliza, we've really expanded on the housing element, especially as it related to identifying or trying to encourage alternative types of housing. And we've expanded our historic preservation policies and really tied them to economic development. And then natural resources, all those policies related to open space and to environment have been carried over. And then the public facilities element, you see the transportation element has been renamed to mobility to account for the other alternative modes of transportation. And then the rest of the elements which are required by statute to be incorporated into the comprehensive plan are also part of this plan and are really the last half of it. And a lot of those policies have been tweaked, but they really have not fundamentally changed. And then lastly, the intergovernmental coordination. That was also mentioned by Eliza, but I wanted to mention to you was that there is, what this is really asking us to do is to coordinate with other agencies related to planning. And I really want to point out that there's an opportunity to work with the county on a master land use plan or annexation strategy, whatever that is, to kind of help us lay out the groundwork of how we want to annex properties or how they should be annexed in a priority way. We're the sole provider of utilities. So our policy right now in our code is that if you request connection to our utilities, water or sewer, you must annex. And so we probably need to work with the county on the best land use strategy and the best way going forward with that, because there's an opportunity then too also to allow to accommodate development and growth in these other areas that are unincorporated inside our urban service area. And so lastly, just to summarize the strategies, this is just some of the main ones that we feel are really important. 2 of them we're going forward with right now. Again, that's the mobility or multimodal master plan, and we're also going forward with the resiliency strategic plan. We have the people from the East Coast Central Florida Regional Planning Council helping us with a vulnerability analysis right now, and we should have a draft presentation on that for you in April as well. And then we have on your agenda, on your consent agenda, a request for you to approve an advisability directing us to go forward with this. And that means we'll go forward with the public meetings and public hearings to get the public's input on this, and also allow the state an opportunity to review it and see and get their input. And then it will always come back to you in parts, and then eventually at the end in the whole for your adoption. This does include a strategy to adopt design standards. So once everything is adopted, then when we go forward with that, that portion of this project. And then there's also an adoption strategy, which I'll explain in another presentation to you more specifically what that means. So basically, that's just really outlining how this plan will be adopted. And so with that, I just want to thank Eliza and her group with Kane and Associates and all their help with this. We've really enjoyed working with them. And with that, I'll try and answer any questions you have.
I have some for you. Member Stokel.
How often do we update our comprehensive plan?
By law, we're supposed to review it every 7 years. That's the EAR process.
Okay, perfect. I don't have any questions for you guys. I'm thoroughly impressed, and it makes me very excited. So, thank you.
Member Jordan.
Press the button. I thought this thing was well designed. You got a good structure here, and you presented it extremely well for sure. I'm pretty excited because of the fact that we've got to think about the young people again, and they don't want to live in these big houses that we have. They don't want to cut grass. You know, they're looking for an alternative way of living so they can be outside more. And what we're doing is preparing Titusville for the future. I think there's some tweaking that needs to occur because nothing is perfect, but you guys have done an excellent job of bringing a good vision for us and a good plan for us to look at and decide how we want to go. But I really appreciate this for sure. You could tell that you all worked really hard and thought about all the different areas that we need to think about. I like the different modes that we have, and I like the integration that we're doing. Instead of just saying, no, if it's industrial, it's got to be here, you're now combining all these things together where you can actually work on the bottom, live on the top. That's really good. Plus, you can walk over to get groceries and maybe go see a movie and all that stuff without using gas, which is a really good thing for sure, and that's where we should be going now. So really appreciate what you all did.
Thank you.
Vice Mayor.
I think you're in a unique situation, and first of all, having been able to see several of your presentations and the workshops, the way you put this together, as has been said, has been amazing. But you're in a unique situation that you're almost looking to try to incorporate a bit of a planned community, so to speak, in a community or in a town that's been here since 1867. So I really like a lot of what you're trying to do, and similar to what Member Jordan said, you're kind of bringing us into the next step of development. My sister-in-law lives in a community over in the Brandon area that has been pre-planned out very well, and that's really nice when you can do that. But they've got the shopping within walking distance, you know, they're the nice-looking shops, and then right next to that you've got the park. And again, I thought it was very interesting when you said it's not how much is in the park necessarily, it's how far is the park. And I think, again, that our millennials are very much into, you know, perhaps going to the park and then going to the Wi-Fi shop and those sort of things. So I think you're right on where you need to be, and I look forward to seeing where we end up with this. Very well done.
I would echo all of those comments. I won't repeat them, I'll just echo them.
Can I just agree? I'm not going to add.
Yes, you can.
But yes, it
you
is
certainly
good.
can. That's what I did. I did have one question. You made a statement about that in order to get on city services, they have to live, the property has to be within the city? That has changed recently, or?
But you're talking about the connecting to our water and sewer?
Yeah.
The scenario is if the property is in the urban service area, utility service area,
Yeah.
but it's in the unincorporated area of the county, and they are going to be developed, we're the only sole provider of utilities. So the code requires us to ask them to annex into the city.
But you just said ask, not
Well, it
demand.
requires, I
Because there is-
believe,
I think there is another way to do it. I'm just asking if that has changed.
every situation is a little different, but typically when the property is too far away from the city boundaries, we'll ask them to sign an agreement, thereby allowing us to annex the property if and when our boundaries are close to them.
Or becomes contiguous, I think
Yeah.
is what it says. Yeah, I just remember that being part of it, and I think yours wasn't quite clear on that. You said they have to come in. But thank you. Other than that, it was wonderful. We appreciate it. I think we need two motions on this. One is to accept the presentation by Kane and Associates and staff related to the 2014 40 Vision-Based Comprehensive Plan.
Second.
Okay.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor say yes.
Yes.
Passes unanimously. The second, and this is the one I don't have down here, but I think I heard you. Motion directing staff to go forward with the...
Sir, that's part of your consent agenda.
Oh, okay.
Yes, sir.
I'm sorry. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next item is, let me make sure I didn't skip any boards and commissions. Titusville Environmental Commission Semi-Annual Report. We have a written report, so we need to accept that. Somebody want to make the, I'm sorry?
Move for approval.
Okay.
Second.
To move to accept the Environmental Commission Semi-Annual Report as written. Right?
Yes.
Thank you, sir. And I have a second to that. And any,
Discussion?
no, I have a second.
No, I just wanted to discuss.
Oh, discussion, yeah, go ahead.
Not a lot, but simply stated, I think that TEC has become an extremely important committee to us, and if there's not a scheduled time or sometime during the year where they make a presentation where we can ask questions, I would like to see that we do that. I'm totally in favor of accepting this report. I would just like to think that down the road, we'd actually get an opportunity to have them present it and ask questions of where they're at.
We have a consensus on that? We don't need to take a vote
Please.
if we do. Okay, city manager, you address that. B, Board of Trustees of the General Employees Pension Plan, city manager.
The term of member Terry Tolbert expires on November 30th, 2018. He's expressed his willingness and desire to continue to serve on this board for a 3-year term, which will expire on November 30th, 2021. In addition, Mr. Stan Retz was appointed by the remaining 4 trustees of the Board of Trustees for the General Employees Pension Plan to serve an additional 3 years for a term to expire on November 30th, 2021. This appointment was made on November 20th, 2018, and must be confirmed by the City Council.
Can we do that in one motion?
I would do 2.
2 motions?
Yes, sir.
All right.
I'd move to reappoint Terry Tolbert to the board.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor say yes.
Yes.
Passes unanimously. Next motion.
And then I'd move to confirm the appointment of Stan Retz to the board.
I have a motion, I have a second. I have a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say yes.
Yes.
Passes unanimously. Planning and Zoning Commission.
Mayor, could we go back to item A, TEC? I believe you had a consensus about asking them to come back and give a presentation, but I do not believe that the council actually voted on the motion to accept the
Oh,
report.
really? I'm sorry. Okay, can, who was the maker of the motion? I'm sorry.
And then Joe was seconded.
Okay.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor say yes.
Yes.
Passes unanimously. Next item is item C.
Yes, sir. Item 6C, currently there's 1 vacancy for regular member with a term to expire on January 31st, 2020. There's currently 1 application on file for consideration. Ms. Patricia Hare has expressed her willingness and desire to serve on this commission as a regular member. Ms. Hare currently serves as a non-voting Brevard County School Board appointee to the commission. She has advised that if the appointment to the regular position by City Council, she will resign the non-voting Brevard County School Board appointee. Her application is attached for your consideration. There are no other applications on file.
Council, what's your pleasure?
Okay, I'm going to move to appoint Pat Hare to the Planning and Zoning Commission.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor say yes.
Yes.
Anybody opposed, like sign? I hear none. Passes unanimously. Board of Adjustments and Appeals.
Alternate member, Mr. Tony Ortiz, has submitted his resignation effective November 22nd, 2018. His term expires on July 31st, 2020. Currently, there are no applications on file.
Move for approval.
Nick, we don't have an approval. We don't have a candidate.
Right. Well, you can't let him go. I mean,
Oh,
I mean,
just-
you can't stop it. You can't stop it, right?
That's a new thought, Robert, keep it.
Can we move
Next.
to accept the resignation?
That's what I was doing.
Oh, okay, can I?
What we can move firstly is to, well, I guess he's only been there a short period of time, so I guess not at this point. But what was your
I thought-
request, sir?
We wanted to accept the resignation,
I
right?
thought you said that we weren't going to accept it.
No, I didn't say that. I said we had to. You're right.
You're right.
You told me I couldn't do it.
You're right. No,
God.
I thought you were going to appoint someone.
No.
My fault.
It's okay.
Okay, we have a motion. Any further discussion? I hear none. All those in favor say yes.
Yes.
Any opposed, like sign, passes unanimously. Next item is petitions and requests from the public present on agenda items. Yes, ma'am. How are you? Name and address, please.
Robin Taylor, 4997 River Edge Drive, Titusville. There's some confusion on the motion or the ordinance that was passed when it was presented to Planning and Zoning and also to City Council for the first and second reading. The wording in the ordinance did not include any limit. Member Nelson made the motion to approve it as written. And then when I spoke with Mr. Parrish on the 19th, which the meeting was on November 13th after the motion was passed, he said it was approved with the stipulation that further encroachments cannot exceed 5 feet. So this will really interfere with the conformity that we were trying to approve. You have all seen my pictures. The current balcony that I have is 8 feet. We are trying to make this actually a maximum of 8 feet. So we really don't mind putting a limit on it, but we do ask that it be changed to an 8-foot limit if that's a consideration.
Ms. Pasaka, would you please come up and kind of clear this up for us if you can?
I guess my confusion, what I was stating, is that there was no discussion of a 5-foot limit. There was nothing. And I even went back and looked at the YouTube video of the meeting and went through the whole thing, and there was no discussion. Your motion was to accept it as written. So I guess I don't understand where the 5-foot came from. But like I said, it can be a good thing. If we can change it to an 8-foot max, it would be perfect, because that's what we're trying to bring Hidden Cove to, is an 8-foot maximum extension. So,
Ms. Pasaka?
The summary of action reflects, as I sent Ms. Taylor, the summary of action reflects that the setback, that the porches were not going to extend farther than 5 feet into the setback. And the reason for that is because there is a setback from both the property line and a setback from the water that is based, because this was allowing an extension of cantilevered porches toward the water, toward the Indian River Lagoon. And in order to keep from encroaching too far into that area, the staff proposed that there would be a 5-foot setback. And I believe that I provided that information to you in writing at the time. I believe I gave it to the clerk, who distributed it to everyone during the public hearing. But the staff simply did what the summary of action reflected.
Are there, I'm a little confused. Are there already, you want to make them all the same?
yes, there's already people who have done it.
How did they do that?
They got permits from the city and they were approved.
Everyone's property is a little bit different shape. Some people are closer to the setback or the back of their lot than others. I believe that Ms. Taylor got one of those lots which is a little bit shorter and not quite as deep as some of the others. But Ms. Taylor does have the right to come and ask for a variance, or we can make what I believe will be the either Fourth or Fifth Amendment to the code to address this issue.
Will, in doing that amendment, which will be the easier way to do it, as opposed to a variation, certainly, will that cause any particular issues with neighbors or others?
I don't know. I haven't analyzed that. I can bring that information back to council, but I can't tell you that for sure right now.
I have a light. Member Stokel?
Can I make a statement?
Yes, ma'am.
2 of the units that were permitted by the city and approved are the 2 smallest lots in the entire community. I currently am probably the next one, and I am still 40 feet from the water, which the minimum setback from the water is 25 feet. So I don't see where the 8-foot is going to, like I said, mine's the next shortest from the water, so everybody else, there are people that will actually be able to go further than 8 feet, which we don't want them to do. We would like to make it a maximum of 8 feet, but this way, right now, I have an 8-foot balcony already, so I would like the 3rd floor balcony to be an 8-foot to match that, which would bring it into conformity for the whole community. Excuse me. I feel like I'm losing my voice, but that's, if we can make that adjustment to an 8-foot maximum, then we wouldn't have the situation where people are going to try and come and get a variance or whatever, because we will incorporate that into our homeowners' documents.
Okay. Let's ask council what they think. I have Member Stokel first.
Okay, I'm remembering this discussion now. It's coming back to me. Clarification. This was, you cannot go more than 5 feet into what their current setback is. So if it's a 25-foot setback, you can go in up to 5 feet, and you would still have a 20-foot setback. Is that correct?
That is correct. And,
okay.
And I know that what Ms. Taylor's saying about the 40 feet from the water,
right.
Her property does not extend all the way to the water. There's a common area. That's why that's why the distance to the water in this instance isn't the same as the distance from her property line.
Okay. And I remember with this discussion, I think it was, we didn't want to have the potential of the porch extending close to the water where things could be tossed into the water. Was that correct?
We talked about the fact that we had this 25-foot preservation along the shoreline.
Okay.
Now, in this instance, as I said, the shoreline is farther away than her property line, but that is not the case for every property.
So to me, it seems like she would potentially be eligible for a variance, knowing that.
Well, she can apply for a variance.
Okay.
That
makes sense to me.
You'd have to look at what the hardship is.
Okay.
But she has the right to do that.
Okay. Yeah, and I'd be curious if we were to make a change along the whole, how that would actually look, since it's different proximities to the water, depending on what property you have.
We don't have surveys for all the properties. We'd have to give you our best guess based on aerial photographs.
Okay, thank you.
Member Nelson?
Peggy, so we have 40 feet from her property to the shoreline, to the shore, correct?
Based on what Ms. Taylor has told me. As I said, I don't have a survey.
And then 25 feet, it sounds like, to the common area?
Her setback, I believe she probably encroaches into that setback already, but that is the original setback. And I would just like to add one, no, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm confusing myself. But without a survey, I can't tell you exactly how close she is to her setback line.
I will tell you, with the way it is now, the porch that we added on is a 10-foot setback from my property line. And I was told with this new wording that was presented to Planning and Zoning and City Council on first and second reading, there was no setback, if I can read it, with any townhouse development adjacent to the Indian River Lagoon and located in the R3 district, elevated decks or balconies excluding screen rooms or other enclosures on townhouses may project into the rear yard setback toward the water where the property is adjacent to a major water body or a common area. Open stairs and fire escapes and chimneys on townhouses may project no more than 4 feet into the required setback. So there's nothing saying about a limit to the rear setback. So basically what you're saying now at this point is that I can't have a balcony at all. Basically what you're telling me.
I believe the issue is that you want an 8-foot, and we would allow a 5-foot. So you would have 5 feet of balcony, where you want an 8-foot balcony.
Yes.
So I think it's not that you can't have any. I think it's simply you can't have one that is the size that you want. And I believe this conversation came up because the Planning and Zoning recommended against this ordinance. And,
Okay.
and
They recommended further discussion on it.
Yes.
Ma'am,
They recommended
please,
tabling,
we
thank
gave-
you.
We
They-
give you time to speak, and we.
Thank you,
allow our
but I
staff to
appreciate
speak.
that. They did recommend tabling for it. So as part of the concern seemed to be the fact that there was no specifics as to how far this could extend into the setback. And I think that that was probably an oversight on staff's part, that there should have been a maximum number in the beginning, because we would not like
Right.
to see all setbacks done away with entirely. So, and it's very unusual that we talk about primary structures going into a setback. And the reason that staff felt comfortable with this was because it was not going to impact a rear neighbor, because it was backing up to either a common area or a large water body like the lagoon.
Okay.
But
I
if council wants to say, to extend it to 8 or 10 or whatever distance you want, it simply would require an additional change to the code. But as I said, staff feels like we have already changed this code multiple times to try and address these issues.
I guess I don't have a huge problem with it, I don't think. I would ask you guys to look at it, come back and say, you know, yay or nay, and this is why.
Does that situation still exists where it doesn't affect anyone else, is that correct?
There are, to my memory, there are 2 condominiums that this would impact that are R3 up against the Indian River Lagoon.
Okay.
How does it impact them? I'm not sure.
Well, I'm not sure either, except that as part of the conversation in the Planning and Zoning Commission, apparently it was the other condominium that's also R3, when they put their second-story porches into the setback, that actually caused the city to create a whole new code that required an environmental area impact, environmental area anyway, a requirement that now every single time that somebody wanted to build up against the river in the shoreline, they had to go through an elaborate process, because people were so concerned about this one condominium that had extended their porches so far. So that history was brought forward as part of the Planning and Zoning discussion, which is why they were concerned about it and recommended that this be tabled.
Okay. I guess what I'm saying is I really don't have a huge problem with 3 extra feet, because you're still looking at 30 some odd feet from the shoreline. And I guess the question is really going to be how far to the common property, which sounds like there's plenty of room. So if there's not a huge problem with it, then I would say let's do it.
As I said, I don't know what this would look like. I know what Ms. Taylor says about her property. I do not know anything else about any of the other properties.
Okay.
Member Jordan?
Because I'm new, I don't know what you're talking about at all. But I heard something, because I just went through it, when you start talking about variances, that could take some time. So my first question to you is this a new this is, I heard you say your second floor is already 8 feet, so you want to do the third floor to 8
You can take
feet.
a look at these if you want to take a look at these.
Well, what I'm trying to get to is,
Why don't you bring them up to me and I'll pass them out?
okay, what I'm trying to get to is for Peggy to do her thing, okay? For Peggy to do her investigation, you have a timeline where you have to get this done, or you have time to? I
I've
know
been
you're
working on this for
frustrated.
5 years.
Okay. Oh, so another year won't hurt you at all. Only joking. Come on, don't give me that look. My gosh.
We're melting.
Okay, this is over. This is near you, right?
No.
Oh, it's not?
This is Hidden Cove, down
okay.
south of 50.
Okay, so you're trying to extend. You want to do another one to extend it 8 feet?
This is my balcony right here.
Right here.
I just want to come out even with that one.
Okay.
And you can see everybody else is kind of, that graduate is further away from the shoreline.
And our code is just saying that it needs to be.
I'm going to pass it down to everybody else.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't realize.
Well, I'd let Ms. Busaka answer your question.
I'm sorry. So the code is, since she does have, this is 5 feet, right?
No, that's 8 feet.
Oh, this is already 8 feet,
That balcony is already 8 feet.
but it comes out.
8 feet.
I mean, your building is, I see is, you got another building that's in some, right?
Well, it's part of the same building, it's just a
Okay, so
setback. Right.
and your building is where?
I'm in the same building.
Circle.
That's
This
all
one
the
is
same
circle.
building.
Oh, okay.
There's 8 units, a townhouse. There's 8 units in that townhouse, and there's different setbacks.
And this is 40 feet from there?
That's 40 feet from the water.
Okay. And the setback is 25 feet?
It is. As I said, her property line does not go to the water.
Okay. So. Okay, but your property line is how far away?
From the end of that second floor balcony is 10 feet from my property line.
Oh. That's the problem.
There's some confusion with that's what the confusion is. You could add a porch on, a screen porch on the ground floor with a 10-foot setback.
Okay.
But you can only add a balcony with a 25-foot setback.
If I could, there are
Yeah.
two different setbacks. One is an accessory structure, and one is the primary structure.
Okay.
A screened-in porch, we have had an interpretation that was made years ago by the building official that that was an accessory structure. The problem is, once that screened porch gets a glass on it, it becomes a primary structure.
right, okay.
So the staff in the past looked at it one way, not thinking about the fact that it then becomes a primary structure and becomes non-conforming. So what has happened is, over the years, between interpretations by previous staff members and people making modifications to existing, we have a lot of nonconformity. I would be happy to go through and, by the best of our ability, using an aerial, show you what this means. But what we're talking about is amending the code for one screened porch.
I think the challenge that I have, because I've gone through the variance process, is the fact you said a word that I was listening to, and it was hardship. And it would be very hard for her to prove that there's a hardship there, I believe. Right?
I believe that too, but that is the option she has. We either change the code or we get a variance to the
Right.
code.
And what I'm trying to do is to make sure that we're not kicking the can down the road, and she is not going to get what she wants, but it's just going to be taken from us for a little while, but then she'll end up coming back here and saying, well, that didn't work, I need something else.
Right, and the only permanent solution here is definitely that you amend the code. Now, in the past, they have just been balconies, and then someone said, let's make it into a room. And then they've said, let's put a balcony on the back of our room because we like having a balcony. That's how we started, that's how this became from this wide to that wide.
Right.
Because people began to close in these balconies, and the council has continued to try and assist them as they've done this. In fact, you may not have been able to see, but there was a picture where someone actually has a walkway with no landing on it. Stairs. Because they put it right up into there, even though a landing is required by the code. So there's been a number of things that you see that may or may not have been permitted. I can't tell you that without looking at each individual. I'm just saying that this is not something that was created overnight by everyone following the code. Some people, I like to call them self-starters, and I think it's what makes America great, is that they go out there and they accomplish. But it's not always consistent with the code.
With all this construction that went on, it brought us into nonconformity. If we have this 8 foot, we can take the whole thing back into conformity. Here are your sizes of your lots. Mine is right here. You can see they get longer, and the river gets further away. So.
By conformity, you mean conforming with each other? Is that what you're saying?
Instead of the lots.
And look, you've got different people with enclosed balconies with no, they've enclosed the original balcony and have no current balcony. There are 5 units that actually built out and got their balconies with permits from the city.
Do you have an association that would require them to do that?
I'm the president of the association.
Would you answer the second part of the question?
I'm sorry, restate your question, please.
Do you have an organization, which you have established that you have, but will that organization require the rest of the people to come into conformity?
Well, that's what we're working on. I had 8 people at the original first reading that want to do this. There's already 5 that have done it, and then there's other ones that has spoken. So everybody wants to bring this back into conformity. That extra 3 feet will solve all those problems.
But you have not put that in writing to those people?
Yes, we've discussed this at our meetings.
Discussing and signing are 2 different things. Do you have anything established that everybody in the organization has agreed to come into conformity?
There's not 100% agreement.
Okay.
There's some people that think that nothing should be changed, but it's already been changed. So basically, some people would like people to go back
The
to what
impression I
original.
was getting is that everybody had agreed. Now we just established not everybody agreed. So that is...
Well, we have an agreement for the majority.
Okay, I'll accept that, but it says the same thing I just said. Not everybody has agreed. Next one. Member Stokel.
Okay, to get some clarification here, you said this balcony is already 8 feet?
Yes.
So is this non-conforming right now?
Yes.
Okay, and you want to do a balcony above it the same exact?
Exactly.
Okay.
Out the same distance.
I'm open to looking at the 8 foot. I'm very careful of us spot zoning, where it may be okay for you, I don't know about the other pieces of property. So I would like to see if Peggy could potentially come back to see what would it going 8 feet into the setback look like, to see if that's possible, or what kind of potential hardship. And then if it's not looking good for the other properties based on what our vision is, I don't know. I feel like the variance would be an option for you, but yours is further away from the water than the others. And
No, mine's closer to the water than any of the other ones.
all of them?
All the ones that have, there's 2 around the corner
I
that
thought-
have the smallest lots that have already done this. And they were approved and permitted by the city. Mine is the next closest to the water that,
I thought yours was not. I thought yours had, like, you said the 40 feet, and I thought some of them were like 25 feet.
those are the ones that have already done it. They are now only like 10 feet from the water or 15 feet from the water.
Oh, boy. Okay.
But they've already done this.
Right. I'd be open to looking at what it would be personally, but hopefully we can
City Attorney,
get it resolved.
are you through?
Help.
I agree with Member Stokel. You really need to be careful and concerned when you're writing code for a particular property owner. That's spot zoning. That's not something you should be doing, is writing code for a particular property. The zoning code applies to properties in that zoning category. Certainly, staff can bring back information on how that would apply, but conversation seems to be geared towards a particular property owner. How do we solve a property owners by changing the zoning code? You need to look at that zoning. If a particular property owner can't comply with the code, that's what the variance process is for. But certainly, if you want staff to bring back information, but you always need to be concerned about changing your zoning code for a particular property.
Okay, Member Nelson?
I understand what you're saying, Richard. When I look at this photograph, I sort of look at it with the idea that all of these need to be balconies, not rooms. But also in terms of, how do you get out of a building if there's a fire, if there's an emergency, and you're on the third floor, and that does provide some safety to the residents. But I agree with you, spot zoning would not be appropriate, but on the other hand, the other people do have have already done this, and it is providing some safety for the residents. So that was sort of my thought.
I don't know, as staff said, we don't know, we shouldn't be doing that from the dais, and we're just looking at one
Well, that's
property
what I'm
owner's
saying.
sit in a public hearing.
Yeah, so that's sort of why I think we're asking for information, for staff to come back with information.
Staff's happy to do the best we can without surveys.
Okay. Member Jordan?
Okay, you're not gonna like what I'm gonna say. Look at me, I'm gonna tell you. We've got requirements. You said that your lot is smaller, probably one of the smallest there. So your setback is, you don't have that much room. You almost got me when you said, well, you got an 8-foot balcony already, and you want to do the next one 8 feet too. The unfortunate thing is I've had the experience where I had to do a variance, and I found that my existing building is not per code. I didn't build it, it's not per code, but I went through the variance process, cost me a lot of money, and actually I'm trying to save you here from spending money because I'm going back to what I said before, hardship. I don't see, if you go through the variance process, where you want to prove that you have a hardship, especially since we have the rules now that says you can build a 5-foot. What you want to do is build the 8-foot. Can you live with a 5-foot? You don't want to, but can you live with it?
No, I guess that depends on how you look at it, because you're also adding to the nonconformity of the whole community by doing that.
The community, but we have rules that say this is what it's supposed to be. And just because these people may be illegal, we can't continue to let you do what you want to when there's rules that say this is what it's supposed to be. I understand what you're talking about, the conformity of the neighborhood, but there's conformity of the rules that we have also. So I'm asking, because I'm trying to save you money and time. You want to build the structure, and right now, based on what's on the table, you can build a 5-foot structure. You cannot build an 8-foot. And if you go through the variance, I just believe that you're just going to be wasting your time, because I don't believe you're going to be able to prove that there's a hardship. Not based on the rules that I know when I had to go through the whole process. I'm just trying to be open with it. So can you live with the 5-foot?
No.
So you won't build it, if it comes back and there's nothing we can do, then you won't build the balcony. Is that what you're saying?
You want to know my honest answer?
Yeah.
I will get an attorney.
Oh.
I mean, that's.
Well, there you go.
We're trying to, I've been working with Hidden Cove, like I said, for 5 years, and we're trying our best to bring this in. If you look at when it was originally built and the code that was effective then, we are so out of code in every aspect of the current code. And according to Gene Bowles, the planning designer for the state of Florida, he says it can be done.
Okay. So where are we?
We'll go to the next speaker, sir. Vice Mayor Diesel.
Where he says it can be done, looking at those pictures, clearly anything can be done.
Right.
And there's a part of me that looks at that, and perhaps we've already had spot zoning because you said it's been done in some areas over there. That concerns me, and I get your point. I mean, I want property owners to be able to, within reason and within code, do what they want to do with their property. I get that. And then the part that others did it, that's a concern. The spot zoning bothers me. Getting a variance and having to prove a hardship, I'm concerned about that. I'd like to see more conformity back there. I mean, it's a lovely place to live, clearly, but in some cases, it's starting to look like a balcony jungle. And it's looking like, well, I'm going to, it's almost like I'm going to go 8 feet. Well, then the next year, we're going to have somebody come in here. I want to go 10 feet. Well, it's only 2 feet. And then I could totally understand that Ms. Busaka is in a quandary over here of how to make this work. Where are we going to stop? And it just looks like we got balconies on top of balconies. Now, I also understand, I think that it was said earlier, perhaps we could, the hardship could possibly be that there's a fire escape there better if you have a balcony than if you don't. It's very, very complicated, I would agree. I'm not for spot zoning. I think the balconies almost look like they're getting out of hand over there to me.
When you say spot zoning, are you talking about me as an individual?
I'm talking about when you came, like you said, when you came the first time, you had a row of people.
Right.
My impression was we were going to zone this for everybody. And
Well,
now
isn't
we're
that
down
what
to
it's-
one person and one concern, and the rest of them aren't here. I don't know where they're at, and as you said, some are for it, some are against it. It gets real tricky when we start off with a whole line of people and we're going to zone for a zone, an entire area. Right, and then now it looks like, well, some don't want to go, some don't want anything there, and it just sounds like it's putting certainly the planners in an impossible situation because, again, we are looking to spot, I think that's what you're really asking for. We're asking for a spot zone for your unit.
That's not necessarily true. If we do the 8 foot, it would be for the entire, for our community and one other community. That's for two.
And I was all
Is that
for that.
correct?
If you go back like you did, look at YouTube, I think we were all for it. Let's make this happen, and everybody left happy. But now it seems as though we're not quite with the same unanimous decision. I don't know how you deal with that. I mean, applying for the variance or changing the code. If we're changing the code, I thought we already did the code for the group of people. And you just said we've changed that probably 5 different times.
It may have only been 4, but we've changed it multiple times.
And that's where, and quite honestly, when I look at the back here, and some are longer, some are shorter, some are taller, it looks like it's been changed 4 or 5 different times. And every time you do a code, you're trying to get some conformity, and we seem to have missed that. And I don't have an answer for that.
If it's changed to the 8 feet, it affects our whole community plus the other community, correct?
Those are the 2 existing R3s that are along the lagoon, yes.
And I would like for you to show me where the code was actually changed 4 times. As far as I understand, this is the only time the code has actually been changed.
That's the only part, this portion of the quote has been changed. I will be happy to send you that information.
Okay.
Mr. Saka, I have a question. And if you mentioned surveys and looking at it and being able to make a better decision or a more informed decision at that point, is that something that is the case, that if you looked at it, you could give us a more definitive answer as to?
I could. What we have, there's a measurement tool on the property appraisers database. It's not the same as a survey, but it would give an idea as to where the setbacks are and where the balconies are at the time the picture was taken, which may have been a couple of years. And as I said, there may have been some changes in between, but I could give you a general idea.
If the requester, and this is going to be up to you, I'm not saying you have to do anything, were to get that information and give it to you, where city staff wouldn't have to deal with that or incur it? Is that
It's not that challenging. I mean, it's just going to be, and I hate to use this term, but it's going to be kind of quick and dirty. But I can certainly do that. It's just not going to be the same as a survey, so there's no guarantees. When a survey comes in, it could be off.
Oh,
I can't promise you
I'm not saying
that.
you're looking for a particular outcome.
Right, but I can give you a general sense.
But I'd like you to...
Give a general idea, right?
I'd like you to look at... Frankly, that's your only chance at this point, is for staff to look at it and see if it's feasible. You have a lot of loose ends there, and you know that. I have the same problem that I asked you about before, and you kind of went around it, but you finally answered me and said, no, you don't have everybody in agreement, and you don't have apparently, and I asked you that question, the ability to make them do it, but you didn't answer that question either. So you might think about getting something at least together with your people over there, because that's going to influence us a great deal. We don't want to get into a neighborhood fight, is what it comes out. I want it, I don't want it, why is the city doing this, why are they letting them do that, why don't you let us do this? That's up to you guys. So if you're the president, I'd suggest you go there and through whatever methodology you have, at least get an agreement that everybody signs on, or maybe as many as possible. I don't know. You have to do that. Understood?
Okey doke.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks.
Oh, wait, we have one more light?
No, you actually, you spoke eloquently about this whole thing. I think you're totally correct. I think the safest place for us to be is to leave it the way it is, because you're on a small piece of property. Your property line is different than the rest, and you're asking for 8 feet. We've already said you can do 5 feet, and you say you won't live with that.
Let's see what the information brings. Let's not
I know I'm right. Okay.
But Robert, you always know you're right.
I know. I always know I'm right. I know I'm right about that. I just don't want, honestly, I just don't want you to have to go through a variance for it and spend a lot of money trying to help.
Thank you, ma'am.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other petitions and requests from nobody out there? Okay. Consent agenda.
Yes, sir. City Clerk, are there any cards? City Council members, would you like to pull any of the consent agenda items A through J?
I see here no one, no lights lit.
Okay, I will read A through J for the record. Consent agenda item 8A, adopt the Tifa LLC FY19 budget and authorize the mayor to execute the consent of members. Consent agenda item 8B, approve the award of contract bid number 19B005 to Tom Evans Environmental of Lakeland, Florida for the rehabilitation of the high service pump number 6 in the amount of $58,000 and authorize the mayor to execute the contract. Consent agenda item 8C, approve the collective bargaining agreement between the Florida State Fraternal Order of Police, Incorporated, FOP, police officers, corporals, sergeants, and dispatchers bargaining unit, and the City of Titusville, and approve the retroactivity of wages back to the first pay period of FY19. Consent agenda item 8D, approve the collective bargaining agreement between the Florida State Lodge Fraternal Order of Police, Incorporated, FOP, Lieutenants Bargaining Unit, and the City of Titusville, and approve retroactivity of wages back to the first pay period of FY19. Consent agenda item 8E, approve the award of bid number 1 to Beck Auto Sales of Palatka, Florida, in the amount of $94,855 for the purchase of 5 half-ton pickup trucks. Approve the award of bid number 2 let's see, bid number 2 to Ron Norris of Titusville, Florida, in the amount of $71,692 for the purchase of 1 3/4 ton and 1 ton pickup trucks. Additionally, approve the associated budget amendments transferring additional funds to the capital outlay project for this purchase. Consent agenda item 8F. Approve the award of work order CDM WR004 to CDM Smith Incorporated in the amount of $58,570 to provide engineering consulting services, including but not limited to the preparation and renewal of Florida Department of Environmental Protection wastewater permit applications for the Osprey and Blue Heron water reformation plants, and authorize the mayor to execute the work order. In addition, approve the budget amendment providing funds necessary for the work order. Consent agenda item 8G. Approve the FY19 home disbursement agreement with Brevard County and authorize the mayor and staff to execute the agreements as written. Consent agenda item 8H. Approve advisability to schedule public hearings to transmit the 2040 comprehensive plan to the State Land Planning Agency, Department of Economic Opportunity, for their review. Consent agenda item 8I. Approve the submittal of Florida Jobs Growth Grant Fund Public Infrastructure Grant proposal to the Florida Department of Economic Opportunity for the Launch Now Parklet and authorize the mayor to execute the grant proposal. Consent agenda item 8J. Approve the award of Amendment 1 in the amount of $68,832 to contract C017Q007 WPI and increase the scheduled number of days by 150 days with Wright Pierce Incorporated for the Morning Dove Treatment Plant Solids Trains upgrade. In addition, authorize the mayor to execute the amendment.
I'll ask for a motion to approve consent agenda items A through J.
So moved.
I'll ask for a second. A motion and a second. There are no resolutions, but I would like to call as a roll call vote anyway. Clerk, if you will.
Yes, sir. Member Jordan?
Yes.
Member Nelson?
Yes.
Mayor Johnson?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Diesel?
Yes.
Member Stokel?
Yes.
Passes unanimously. Next item is 9A.
Next item is 9A, which is ordinance number 54, 2018, an ordinance of the City of Titusville, Florida, amending the Code of Ordinances by amending Chapter 30, Development Standards, Sections 30, 331, Applicability, 30, 332, Required Landscape Yards, 30, 333, Exemptions, and 30, 337, Permitted Uses within the Landscape Buffer Yard, establishing that required landscape yards and subdivisions are to be located in a separate tract or common area, providing for severability, repeal of conflicting ordinances, an effective date, and incorporation into the code.
The code requires that landscaping be installed to serve as a buffer between uses, specifically between residential subdivisions and adjacent uses. On occasion, requests are made to locate these buffers within the residential platted lot rather than on a separate tract. Staff would like to clarify the code to ensure that landscaping required in subdivisions is placed within a separate tract maintained as a common area. This is intended to reduce the alteration of the required landscape buffer and to ensure adequate setbacks from the landscaping to permit accessory structures such as pools, sheds to be installed by the homeowner. The Planning and Zoning Commission recommended approval of this action 5-0 as amended by adding the language to be maintained by the homeowners associations on page 14 and 17 of the ordinance relating to permitted perimeter landscaping buffer. This is your second reading and final public hearing of ordinance number 54, 2018, and Ms. Pisaka is available to answer questions that you may have.
Ms. Pisaka, do you have a presentation of any kind you'd like?
Very short, I promise you.
You go right ahead.
There are 3 areas in which the language is the same, and it should probably all say, in a platted subdivision, the required landscape yard shall be located in a separate tract or common area, the language to be added, to be maintained by the homeowners association. So that would be in 3 different sections of the code, just to clarify that these separate landscape tracts will be maintained by the homeowners association. That's consistent with the local planning and zoning recommendation.
Council, do you have any questions of Ms. Pisaka? I see no lights. I'll open the public hearing. Would anybody like to speak? Our young friend in the back. I'll close the public the public hearing. Any further council discussion? I don't have any, but I think we'd want to approve it with the recommended changes, both by staff and the Planning and Zoning Commission.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor say yes.
Yes.
Oh, sorry, roll call. I knew I just wanted to. Roll call, please, clerk.
Member Nelson?
Yes.
Mayor Johnson?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Diesel?
Yes.
Member Stokel?
Yes.
Member Jordan?
Yes.
Passes unanimously. Item B, sir.
Item B is ordinance number 55, 2018, an ordinance of the City of Titusville, Florida, amending the Code of Ordinances relating to business license renewal dates by amending Chapter 11 Licenses and Business Regulations to clarify partial year business tax receipt renewal dates, specifically amending Section 1133 Wind Due and Chapter 22 Vehicles for Hire to amend the permit renewal deadline to be September 30th of each year, specifically amending Section 2262 Issuance, Duration, and Annual Fee, providing for severability, repeal of conflicting ordinances, effective date, and incorporation into the code.
The Planning and Zoning Commission recommended approval of this action 5-0. Chapter 11 of the code relates to business tax receipts, and Chapter 22 contains licensing regulations for taxicabs. In order to better serve the public, the proposed ordinance standardizes the due dates of all business tax receipts, including those for taxicabs, to be due on 30 September annually. The proposed ordinance is intended to make renewal of taxicab licenses easier for owners of multiple vehicles by making all licensing renewable at the same time. The current system is that licenses are renewed at various times depending on the original date of issuance. This requires multiple trips to City Hall to renew the licenses. It will take approximately 1 year to fully implement the proposed renewal schedule. This is your second and final public hearing of ordinance number 55, 2018, and Ms. Busaka is available to answer questions that you may have.
Any comments or presentation? Council, any questions for Ms. Busaka? I will open the public hearing. Are there any cards on this, clerk?
No, sir.
I will close the public hearing. Council discussion, any further discussion? I see no lights. I will ask for a motion on this item.
We're
Moved. We want to get something down here. We'll make sure they know we're here.
Second.
We need to,
We were down here arguing over who was going to make the motion.
I would prefer that the motions there state whether they're in favor or against and the motion and do it by ordinance number. Because the mayor asked for a motion, but the motion maker needs to say motion to approve or deny ordinance number 55,
Okay.
2018.
Please do that. Just, it's right there. Just,
Yeah, we can do it over here.
Motion to approve. Ordinance number 55, 2018, related to business tax receipt renewal dates.
that's sufficient, sir?
Yes. Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion from council? Roll call vote, please.
Mayor Johnson?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Diesel?
Yes.
Member Stokel?
Yes.
Member Jordan? Yes. Member Nelson?
Yes.
Passes unanimously. There are no ordinances first reading, no old business, no new business. Any petitions from the public? Apparently not. Mayor and council's reports. You have my report, written report. Members of council, anyone have anything they would like to report on? I see no lights.
Yeah.
Yep.
Oh, I was pushing the wrong button there.
Oh, I can't tell from here.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Take
Apologize
the
for that.
Coke out of the way so I can see.
Oh, okay.
Member Jordan, sir.
I just want to tell you guys that I really appreciate what the city did as far, or actually it was the Kiwanis Club did for the Christmas parade. I thought it was a really, really nice atmosphere. It really showed what Titusville was all about, being really a little homey place to come in. It's a safe place for all the citizens. There was a lot of cheering, and people seemed to be very happy that day, and I'm really appreciative of that. And my only other thing is to wish everyone a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year, and please be safe.
And The same to you, sir.
I want to comment on that because it plays into what we talked about earlier. First of all, to me, and you guys can comment, I thought there were more people at this parade than any parade I've ever seen here. And it was outstanding. And you add to that the parish lighting on Thursday, the city lighting of the tree on Friday. It was quite the trifecta. I loved it all. But there were a couple dark spots out there, weren't there?
Yes, there were.
But anyway, yeah.
We were getting more lights, Dan.
Yeah.
Come on.
Merry Christmas.
No, Merry Christmas to you. You're getting lights. Okay. Anything else anybody would like to say? I don't hear it. I would, well, I'll wait. City manager's report.
Yes, sir. I have two action items for council's consideration. First is we're starting our next budget. So staff is coordinating with the Florida Institute of Government at UCF to conduct the FY20 strategic planning sessions. As in past years, the city hosts a community conversation on a Saturday morning with business, civic leaders, and interested citizens to gather input on how the city should prioritize and allocate staff and financial resources during the upcoming year. This input is then discussed at the City Council's senior staff workshop, where council provides staff with its FY20 strategic goals and objectives. Both sessions will be facilitated by Ms. Mary Raines, who is the interim director of the Florida Institute of Government. We have proposed dates for you. If I could get you to pick a date, a Saturday.
My preference on the first one, the community conversation, would be February 2nd. And on the second item, council senior staff meeting, I do have a TPO, and as you do also, I think. You're on the, Member Jordan? The TPO, we have a TPO meeting on that day. I'm sorry. So I would prefer that March 7th, if that can be done.
March 7th?
I'm sorry. I prefer meeting on the 7th, whatever day that is. Is it March? Yeah, it's March. It is March 7th. Anybody else have a preference? I see no other preferences.
Okay, so the first community conversation will be February 2nd from 09 to 1200, and the council senior staff workshop will be March 7th, 2019, between 5 and 7 p.m.
Yes, sir.
Second action item per City Code Ordinances Section 2-1C, council authorization is required to use the city seal by any persons or legal entities requesting its usage. The Student Advisory Council is requesting approval to incorporate the city seal on shirts to be worn during advisory council meetings, youth conferences, and other such council events. Request council approve the Student Advisory Council to include the city seal on shirts to be worn by current and future Student Advisory Council members.
Council, what's your pleasure?
So moved.
Have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Not hearing it.
Get faster.
Is that discussion, or are we
Yes,
just?
discussion.
Huh?
That's discussion.
You want to say something? No, okay. I see no real discussion. All those in favor say yes?
Yes.
Any opposed, like sign, passes unanimously.
Yes, sir. My final item, we are having some technical issues with our live broadcast, so staff is working to resolve those issues, as well as some issues that have been identified with our website. So as we begin the new year, there may be the potential that we're not going to be able to broadcast our meetings live until we get these technical issues resolved. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention and hear any feedback from you. We're working diligently to correct the technical issue. We have budgeted money, resources in this year's budget to fix these, but we've just got to see where we're at before the first meeting in January. I just wanted to bring that to council's attention so that you're aware that we may not be able to broadcast in the future.
Okay, thank you, sir. Oh, go ahead.
I'm okay with that simply because right now we don't allow live feedback. We may look at that in the future. But I want to say these while they're not live, they will be available immediately after the fact, so people can still have access to watch them.
That's
It
correct.
just won't be exactly during the meeting.
That's correct.
Perfect, thank you.
And my last issue is on behalf of our 500 dedicated employees. I'd like to wish council, we had a great year. Wish you a very Merry Christmas and Happy Holiday season. Looking forward to all the great things that will be on our horizon in FY19. I think 18 was a very successful year. So we thank you for everything that you do to lead our city, and Merry Christmas to you.
Thank you.
Merry Christmas.
And speaking for the council, and certainly anybody who would like to speak is welcome to, but I think we all thank you and our staff, all of our employees very much, and I appreciate it. We would appreciate it if you put that word out. We think they've worked very hard this year, and we have accomplished a lot, and it's been great under your leadership, sir. So,
Yes, sir. We'll certainly pass it along.
And also, I'd like to say to anybody who's still looking, Merry Christmas. I hope you have a happy holiday season and a safe one. City Attorney, I know there's one more item, but I just wanted, but we were on that vein. I just wanted to keep it up.
We got a roll.
I'm going to follow that.
No. We got one more. City Attorney, sir.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. At the council meeting of November 13, 2018, the City Council expressed concerns about whether or not the Space Coast Fab Lab was meeting its obligations under its agreement with the city. That was an agreement in which the city had provided funding for certain capital equipment purchased by Fab Lab. In response to council's request, I prepared a memo, and it's in your agenda, that sets forth Fab Lab's duties and the remedies available to the city in the event there is ever determined to be a default. Again, the information is in the memorandum for your information. It describes the duties that the Fab Lab was to perform, as well as the remedies are there. I understand staff had a meeting with Fab Lab, and I believe that they have agreed to come to the council meeting, second meeting in January, which would be January 22nd, during presentations. And at that time, they'll give you a presentation on exactly where they are at Fab Lab, and that'll give you an opportunity to better understand what's going on in conjunction with the agreement, and then we could address the issues further.
Just to, since I'm not sure anybody else was involved with this that's here presently, but several years ago, this was brought in, and the former mayor, Mayor Tully, separately went down to Palm Bay, where they had their first area that they were doing this in, and it was amazing, and it looked very good, and the whole council agreed to bring it up. In the interim, there have been a lot of changes where the individuals, right after starting this one up here, started another one in Rockledge, I believe, and then eventually closed that one. And this one, I don't know that any of you had visited it, but it has gone to a certain level and never passed that, and we haven't. I think he's made some presentations to us over the years, but at this point, I think he's a guy who's very well-meaning. I'm not sure he can keep up with all he has. I want to give him a chance, certainly, and but we've already have an agreement, I believe, with him not to give him any more funds on. Is that correct?
I believe we've reimbursed about 33,000 of the 50 that was under the agreement, but it's my understanding they have not asked for any additional monies, and at the meeting that there's not their intention to ask for any further reimbursements.
Well, okay.
I have not received that in writing, but that was...
Okay, we can deal with that, but my recommendation is to give them time, let's look at it, but let's make it an agreement of whatever kind, that we're not going to provide any more funds for it. There are clawbacks in this thing too, but I don't want to, as far as the equipment that we've already given him or given him money for. But hopefully he'll be able to pull it together. I think he's a nice guy and maybe just went out a little further than he should have. But yes, ma'am.
I did talk to Brian Cam after this all came out, and Brian is one of the people that was doing the space industry initiative trying to get apprenticeship programs here and running. They apparently made amends with Eastern Florida College, and so they are back working with them, and they have a consortium. It's now incorporated, and it includes RUAG and OneWeb, SpaceX, and some of the other Blue Origin, some of the other companies. So I think Brian will be talking to the people at Fab Lab, Dave Beavers and his wife, because that is kind of equipment that they will be needing. And originally, Dave Beavers and Brian Cam had talked about cooperating and forming.
I remember that, yeah. But it never happened.
But it never happened, so that may be something that happens at this point.
Well, again, and I hope so, but we will have to see, but we have to kind of, at this point, just limit what our participation is, in my feeling. And we'll not make that decision tonight, but I wanted to give you all of the information so we didn't have to do this at a...
I just wanted to pass that on, that there are some conversations hopefully going on.
I hope it happens, believe me. Okay, is there anything else anybody wants to talk about at this point? If not, I'll call this meeting adjourned.